to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors are able to talk about how they write their books, how they publish them, and how they market them. We are on YouTube. Just search The Writer's Dream, or you can search my name, Linda Maria Frank, or Linda Frank, it's probably under. We have a Facebook page called The Writer's Dream. If you have a question for us, you can post it on The Writer's Dream Facebook page, and we'll try to answer your question. So we would be very happy to talk to anybody who's interested in our authors, who's interested in writing. Please contact us. Our guest today is Richie Narvaez, and he is the author of Roach Killers. And
Roach Killers, singular, and other stories. Yes.
And he is also the president of Mystery Writers of America, New York. And Richie has a really interesting background, and I'd like him to talk about it. I'm going to ask him about your background and how it led you into writing mysteries.
My life story, then. I'll just take 10 minutes or a couple hours. Well, actually, when I think about this, and I think about being in the mystery writing field and the other people I know who are writers, I think a lot of the people who gravitate towards mystery writing often have some sort of inciting incident, sort of like Bruce Wayne deciding to become Batman, when they're younger, that gets them fascinated with crime. Now, I grew up in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, before it became hipster heaven. I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Puerto Rican parents. It was a very, very violent neighborhood back then in the 70s.
Yeah, Williamsburg was tough.
Yeah, it was a tough town. A lot of gangs. I was there for the blackout and everything. One thing that was happening is my father actually was a numbers runner. He was a bookie. You know, the three number, he would have people call him up. He'd be there in the afternoon. People would call up, and he would have these wonderful little papers and write down the numbers, combinations straight. And my mother was one of his best customers. She used to love to play. Every once in a while, we knew if she won money because we would go out and eat and have a lot of, go to a nice restaurant. Anyway, I saw my father involved with this kind of thing, and I knew as a child that it was not legal. I knew that this was something that was a secret, but it didn't seem like it didn't
seem bad.
It didn't seem bad. It was fascinating,
right.
And then he would take me on these runs to pick up the money, and I remember he would just toss a roll of $10,000 in my lap and say, "Hey, that's $10,000." You know, it's just, it'd be fascinating to me. And then he would take me. It was never sort of dangerous. It wasn't like mafia people with guns or the Godfather. It was just like these dark restaurants sometimes, or just regular people, bodegas and stuff like that. But it was just, I would just go around, hang out with it. But it got me fascinated with that part of the world, with that part of society. And also, of course, just living in Williamsburg, being around gunshots, being around gangs, it made me fascinated with that world. So certainly that was part of what drew me into crime writing, certainly. And writing, who knows, when we become artists or writers, there's probably something psychological about that we're all trying to work out. As you as a writer probably know the same kind of feelings. It's like, it's perfect therapy. It's great. This is how, if something happens to you, I like to think of it as writer's revenge. If you want to get something out, then you get it out on paper, because you can't control the world. You can only control your life to some extent. But what's on that page, you are God, and you can make things happen the way you wanted them to happen, or you want them to happen. So I don't know. Did I answer enough? Yes.
So
yes, I'm sorry. I probably went way.
But it was very interesting.
Okay.
And I was thinking about what I was trying to work out with my books. But so you were immersed in this typical, I won't say it was a world of crime, but you were typical of your neighborhood, the kinds of goings-on that were fascinating to you. But then how did you obviously grew up and you went to college?
I went to college, yes, was a good student, yes.
Oh, okay, so how did that all happen, and what do you do now professionally that really kind of enabled you to become a writer?
Well, I was first-generation immigrants. My parents were very much like, go to school, go to school. They were Spanish dominant, and they made sure, they were very focused on success, so they made sure I practiced my English, learned English.
Sure.
That helped me succeed, just gave me the drive. There was no question of me going to college. I just had to go to college. It was, it was natural for me to do. Financial aid, thank God, got me through it all. Was very happy about that. So yes, I made it through. And what got me into writing was, to be honest, I went to college, and as a kid, I was really fascinated by space. I went to college to become an astronaut. I wanted to become.
Of course.
Yes, I wanted to become the first Puerto Rican astronaut. I was really, so I took classes in astronomy and physics and everything, but then I started taking classes in English. And that actually, literature just really drew me in, and creative writing. So
you're a poet, not a scientist.
I became a poet, not a scientist, much to the chagrin of my parents. Like, how are you going to make money like that? But yeah, so I got drawn into it that way. And eventually became a magazine writer, celebrity journalist, that kind of thing. Then got into trade magazine writing, marketing, stuff like that. So my career actually became very diverse, and I do several things now. And I also teach part-time, which helps, as a writer, helps pay the bills.
And what do you teach?
I teach English composition, creative writing, and also business writing. I'm currently teaching, I was teaching at New Jersey City University, wonderful little school in Jersey City. Now I'm teaching at Fashion Institute of Technology in Manhattan, business writing.
Business writing.
Yeah.
See, we were talking about this earlier, about the fact that there is so much writing that is out there that has nothing to do with creative writing.
Yeah.
It has to do with business. It has to do with the internet.
Yeah, there's
technical writing.
Technical writing. I think a lot of people who want to become writers, they think, or people, as I was being facetious about before, but your parents don't necessarily want you to become writers, because what are you going to do? You're not going to make any money at that. Either you're going to be the guy in the tweed jacket with the pipe, or you're going to just be some miserable slob, a poet with a beret, and not making any money. But if you have the talent for writing, for communicating with the written word, there are a million things you could do with that. And actually, if you can communicate with the written word well, this is what I tell my students, so that's why I sound like a teacher now, it'll help you get ahead in business. If you're the guy who can write better, write better than your boss, the boss can, why don't you do this report for me? Can you do that? Yeah,
exactly.
it really helps you. Writing is a tremendously important skill to have.
Well,
end of lecture.
No, as well as finding out about you, I have an ulterior motive, because I too have been in education all my life, and have done career days, and people ask me about writing, which is a career I got into later in life, and I say to them, you're going to have to, if you want to write the great American novel, you are going to have to get a job to support yourself. And I said, there are jobs in writing. There are many jobs in writing, but they don't have to do necessarily with creative writing. And my example is always the mechanic who has to read the manual and the stuff on the computer, because the car is serviced by plugging it into a computer.
Right.
And so you have to read all that, and the amount of technical reading that kids have to, people are always making fun of the younger generation. Look, they can't write, they text, that's all they do. But they also have to deal constantly with the internet, especially if they're in school. And there's a tremendous amount of reading, and I think, and writing.
Yeah.
And writing, and what you say about how you present yourself. You have to present yourself many times in writing.
Yeah, writing is, let's face it, we are all, especially in this kind of society, we all are our own brands. We have to sort of brand ourselves. And the way you communicate, I mean, they may sound a little bit cynical, but the way you communicate to people signals a lot about who you are. And the written word carries a lot of weight. And getting back to what you were saying about the kids nowadays, we were talking about this earlier. It's funny how much they do have to work with language. Despite how much we make fun of them for being zombies who stare at these glowing little machines, they are writing all day long. Sure, they're bastardizing the English language in an awful, awful way, but the English language is a living thing, and we have to accept that perhaps in 50 years, LOL, well, maybe I think even now LOL is an accepted word, but it's going to become, it'll become standard, and even our reports, business reports will be like, LOL, give, that kind of thing. Or president will be saying,
FYI.
Yes, FYI, yes. It'll be part of the formal speech at some point.
Sure, and even in the technical fields, the medical field and engineering, there are all these little acronyms that people use in the military, in particular, and of course that's where the internet came from.
Right. LOL, you have 6 months to live. I guess for a medical, that wouldn't be. Sorry.
about noir.
FYI. FYI.
So you had a career in writing.
Yes, I still do it. I still write. Besides the teaching, I work for an app development company. A couple of friends of mine and I got together, and we make apps. Just little things on the phone. We are one of our the company called Dog and a Horse. So it was developed in Brooklyn, and we've had our own apps, and we do apps for places like Topps trading cards. We make fancy little apps for them, and I write basic background stuff. I do marketing for them, and I write press releases, which are generally pretty regimented,
They
in the
are
way
very
they are.
regimented.
But somebody's got to write them. That has to be written, and also technical copy for an app. People don't think about this, but somebody has to write. Click here for more information. We have to have that. I know that some of the language is very basic, but sometimes you want to play with it. That kind of stuff. You can make a career out of that.
Well, you'll sometimes download something or try to download something, and if the technical language isn't accurate, you're beating on your computer screen and saying terrible things to it because it's not working.
Yeah, I know. Listen, it's not writing Shakespeare. It's not writing. It's not going to get me an Emmy or an Edgar and stuff. But it pays the bills. And in this kind of society we have now, we have to be very conscious of, at least not starving to death.
Yes.
Being a little hungry is good, but that's
But
more.
not too
I think
often.
that's more metaphorical than actually actual.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So then, how did you make this dream? When was the first time you wrote a mystery or got into your mystery?
Back when I was a kid, actually, and this is one of the things that spurred me onto writing. For some reason, my brother and I used to really love Scooby-Doo mysteries. You know Scooby-Doo? Mm-hmm. And my brother, for extra credit for his class, started writing Scooby-Doo mysteries of his own and turning into his teacher. And of course, I always competed. He was my older brother. He's my older brother. Always competed with him. So I had to do the same thing. So I wrote my own story. I wrote my first novel when I was in 3rd grade. It was 3 pages long and illustrated by me. Same plot as Jurassic Park, by the way.
Do you still have it?
No, my teacher kept it. I asked her years for it, she misplaced it. But
She didn't misplace it.
I don't know. Maybe she threw it out. But anyway,
Terrible person threw it.
or I think she sold it to
James Patterson.
Maybe to James Patterson. It's dinosaurs who took over the world. So I think it was stolen.
Not too far from,
Yes, I think. But anyway, so I wrote that. But when it came in high school, I started really taking writing more seriously. Unfortunately, writing a lot of bad poetry. But I did write my first whodunit in high school for a creative writing class, and I really enjoyed doing it. I had sort of been overdosing on Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett quite a bit, and I loved that style of writing. It appealed to me. So that started me on it. But then after I graduated college, I think like a lot of people, I figured, well, I want to be a literary writer. I want to write literary stuff.
Yes.
So I tried to do that, and I got some stuff published, but it didn't feel very satisfying. And it felt, literary writing is its own. I mean, a lot of people say that mystery writing is formulaic. Literary writing has its own formula as well.
Yes.
Must end ambiguously. So I got kind of tired of that, and it took a while, as my life was happening and other things, I didn't get to do that much writing. But not too long ago, there was a magazine called Murderland, Murdaland, and they were looking for literary crime writing stuff, and they wanted something called postmodern noir, whatever that was.
Postmodern
noir. So I said, yes, go ahead, your question.
Like, when I think of the term noir, I think of Double Indemnity.
Yes.
I think in terms of movies.
Right. That's where it starts.
Body Heat. Yeah. Okay, so that's noir. So
noir starts,
modern Laura, maybe.
Right. Yeah, Laura's actually, though it ends happily, but not for the killer.
Yeah.
If you see the killer as the hero of the story, then it is noir. Because noir, I think, ends with the protagonist, his arc is doomed. And that's what makes it noir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then postmodern would be.
Well, whatever postmodernism is.
What is postmodern?
Postmodern has to do
Modern
with.
is now.
I guess we're in postmodern, but postmodern, any kind of literature is supposed to be, I guess, literature that knows it's literature, that is sort of meta, that's in your face and sort of comments on itself. I don't know if there's any real definition, but I think what that was coming from, first of all, just to backtrack, noir comes from film noir with the German expressionism and that whole sort of lighting thing. But it turned out a lot of those stories that were getting turned out in film had very dark endings. A lot of people confuse noir with hard-boiled. Raymond Chandler is not noir when it comes to literature. In Dashiell Hammett, some of his stuff is noirish. It's sort of coming back again, I think, in this postmodern phase of trying to really comment on crime fiction and to make it more realistic and not make it like, Ellery Queen solving a crime, Miss Marple saying, "Oh, I know who did it." Let's everybody gather in the dining room, and I will reveal who the killer is. It was a reaction to that, and it's coming, I think, in the '90s certainly, and with magazines like Murderland, and Thug Lit. These magazines are trying to do something that is literary, but also dark and involving crime. But it's not a detective solving things. So I think I got involved doing that kind of stuff, and it turned out that kind of stuff. It seems like I do it well.
So that led you to publishing.
That led me to publishing, yes.
Okay, and you have a lot of our listeners and the people who follow us are into learning about publishing and marketing. So you have an interesting publishing story where you got published and unpublished and republished. And
I was in and then I was out.
I think that's an interesting comment on the present situation with self-publishing and traditional publishing. Would you like to relate that?
Yeah, it's something. I know a lot of people want to be self-published. It's a great new avenue. Traditional publishing is very difficult. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. And I mean, it's still sort of the place that people want to be, and it has the most prestige. But there are other avenues now, and if you want to, make it as an author, you can do it all on your own, pretty much. Well, what happened was I had been writing and getting a lot of short stories published, and I met this guy in a bar through some friends who was doing who had a publishing company. I won't name it, but they were looking for noir stuff. They had been doing romantic thrillers, I think semi-erotic, and they wanted something noirish because that was becoming very trendy. And I said, well, I'm working on a novel. I'm always working on a novel. But I do have these 10 short stories. Could I do a compilation? And they said, sure, why don't you do a compilation? So I sent it, and that's how I started. And they were a small publisher. And what happened, and I felt great. I'm published. It was only as an ebook, but it was still, it was a publishing company.
Yes.
Then a few months later, about 6 months afterwards, they wrote back and they said, we actually can no longer fulfill the things that a publishing company needs to do, and we're actually going to backtrack the company and become just sort of a self-publishing service provider. So I was published, and then I became self-published. So I don't know, it's sort of...
But there you are.
But there I am, and I'm happy to have the book out.
So tell us about Roach Killers and Other Stories.
So Roach Killer and Other Stories Roach Killer was the first story I wrote, is the one I wrote for Murderland. And it is, I made it whatever postmodern was. It's the story's about a hitman who comes out of prison. And this is, the plot is fairly typical. You've heard this 1,000 times. Guy who, ex-con gets out of prison, wants to go straight, what happens? You know it's going to go wrong. The thing with him, with his character was I made him always talk in the third person. So he constantly refers to himself as Roach Killer. And that just sort of is so bizarre and artificial. And he's sort of commenting on his whole world that whatever postmodern was, it seemed to work, it got accepted. So that was one of the first stories that got me into crime fiction. And then I just started writing a whole bunch after that. I got into one of the Akashic Noir series, two of the Akashic Noir books, Long Island Noir and Indian Country Noir. And then I was in a a compilation of Latino writers, 2 compilations of Latino writers writing crime. So I was getting stuff published here and there, so I became a crime writer, sort of accidentally. Well, not accidentally, it just seemed like that's what I did well.
So you are, but you're published. So
Yeah.
you want to write a novel?
Oh, yes, yes. I wrote a novel, of course, back when I was in college, and no one
And in
will
the
ever
third
see
grade,
that.
too.
Yes, and in the 3rd grade. No one will ever see the first one because of whatever happened to it, and that other one sits in a drawer only to collect dust. No one will see it. It's just horrible Bildungsroman thing that I did. But I have written a novel, and it's being shopped, it's being sent to agents, and they are probably
Great.
using it to they print it out and keep their desks straight. But I'm
Nice.
hoping that to get a bite.
Now, will you ever reach a point where you'll just decide I'm going to go to small press or self-publish or
Oh,
just
yeah.
to get it out there?
Yeah, I want to really try. I think it's important, for a lot of people, when they're at the start of their careers, give traditional publishing a shot, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what they say. And if after a while it doesn't seem to work out, then self-publishing is certainly an option. I think, honestly, the best thing, commercially wise, is get at least one book out traditional published. And this is if you're prolific. And I'm not necessarily that prolific. I can turn out short stories like crazy, but the novel, it takes a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more work. But if you can do this, try to get at least one traditional, because it gives you that prestige. And then you can do the rest self-published or even just ebooks.
But I think even the fact that you're published in magazines and short story anthologies, I think that's prestige right there. You're
Yeah,
published.
I guess yeah, prestige.
That is a form of traditional publishing.
Yes, actually getting into the Akashic series was really very cool for me, and I felt that was
So
kind of
that's, I mean,
prestigious,
that's really, and of course that is on the information that you send to these agents where you published it.
yeah,
and whatnot.
yeah,
And,
all that stuff, and
so
it's on the website.
I have a feeling eventually you're going to get a traditional publisher.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. So getting back to the writing, we've talked a little bit about publishing, and we know what a nightmare marketing is, and
yeah.
who knows, so by that time you'll have your TV show, right? You'll be featured on Law and Order.
Yeah.
Getting back to the writing, what's the hardest part of writing for you?
Just, I come up with ideas all the time. So getting ideas is never difficult. I have ideas constantly. Forming those ideas into a plot. Like I can come up with characters also. I got a great character, I got a great plot, but that character doesn't fit this plot. I try to make things character-driven, but that doesn't always work. Try to make things plot-driven doesn't always work. There is a certain point when I'm writing where it gets easy to finish, but that first maybe third of the short story or anything, just getting that thing in shape, because it's all this stuff that it's unwieldy, and it always takes up too much of my brain, and it's just finally shaping it and shaping it, shaping it, and then it just zooms. But that first, just getting the story started on the page.
Well, that's like the first page syndrome, just
Yes.
writing that first page. I was cleaning out my files the other day, and I found what I used to write my last book, and it's a great big, they sell these Post-its that are huge,
Yes.
they're like 2 feet by 3 feet, and I found it all folded up, and it had the flow chart from chapter to chapter.
Nice.
On how the plot develops, because it's when you write a mystery, it has to all make sense somewhere in there, no matter what, whether it's a cozy or noir or whatever it is, it has to make sense.
Yes, mystery writers are picky, and they will tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, oh my God. On Goodreads or on Amazon, they will tell you what the problem is.
And of course, also with all the CSI shows, they'll tell you, well, that's the wrong.
Yes, that doesn't work
They don't
that
do
way.
that.
Yes,
You
that
don't put
doesn't
that
happen.
bloody thing in a plastic bag.
Right.
What's wrong with
This
you?
is completely wrong. Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, 2
and,
stars.
And they're out there.
Yes.
So I thought to myself, wow, I'm so glad I saved this, because this is going to be a blog.
Yes, yeah, there you go. Excellent, yes.
And but I agree with you. I'll have these great ideas too, and then I'll say, well, how do I make that into a plot?
Yeah.
And how do I want to finish it?
Right.
How do you want that plot to work out?
Yeah, and what is it? And sometimes we're like, whoa, has this been done too much before? What can I do to make this interesting? Is this going just down a familiar road, and am I just using my subconscious to finish it, or can I do something very different with it, make it postmodern or something, or just like sometimes I will be writing something and I'll say, this is fairly typical. Let me completely switch the gender, or the time frame, or the perspective of the story, and that really helps a lot.
Yeah, that's very good advice, because you can go down that path. But there are themes, especially in mysteries, that people love.
Right.
And what makes the book better is that if you can do one of those little plot twists or character changes or points of view changes, and that makes a big difference.
I think that's one of the reasons that mystery writing actually gets knocked as a genre, because people think it's always the same kind of thing. But I think if you're conscious of it, you can actually take a good mystery story into a new place. Maybe the plot's the same. There's a blackmailer, there's a murder, there's something like that. But maybe you could do something different with it, just changing the setting, changing the character.
Well, two things grab me with mysteries. One of them is I like the accuracy of the science, because that's my background.
Right.
The other thing is, the thing that makes a book live for me is the characters.
Yes, yeah.
If I fall in love with the characters, the main characters, you've got me. Stephen King is a perfect example. Do I believe in vampires and all that stuff? Not really. I mean, maybe, but not really. But I love his character. His protagonists are always so sympathetic that I want to find out what happens to them.
Yeah.
If they get bitten in the neck, what's going to happen next? and I'm like, and he does a beautiful job, I think, with characters.
He does a great job with giving you the normal, everyday person, and and so you feel like this is just somebody that you know from down the block, and that pulls you in, because it doesn't seem like somebody incredibly unusual. He likes working with an everyday person.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's his thing.
yeah, that's very true. So what's next for you?
Next for me, besides lunch probably, is next for me is to finish that. Well, I have finished the book. I want to, of course, revise what author doesn't. So there's some things I'm tweaking with it. I'm still waiting to hear back from some agents. I also have another book, a YA book that I want to finish. I just started it last month with a. We talked about this. For Latino characters are important for me, so I'm going to do that, and then I'll just churn out some short stories. Short stories keep me nice and fresh.
That's
with
good.
Writing.
Yeah,
I really
because
like
it's writing.
It's just writing,
Yeah.
and it's important just to write every day, even if it's just something silly.
And that is the best piece of advice that you
Yes.
can give to an author.
Yes, write every day.
Right,
Yeah.
every day. So it was great to have you as a
Oh.
guest. Thanks, Rich.
All right, great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome.